This course video is on ETRs and IEPs, evaluation team reports and individualized education plans. I really like this image here from Barbara Bateman's book, Better IEPs. It really shows the link between the evaluation piece and the assessment piece and how we are developing our IEP goals and what services and placements we're providing for students in special education. The evaluation team report, or the ETR, is something that's completed upon referral to special education. So a teacher will call the school psychologist or intervention specialist, they'll make this referral process or to a child study team, and then the report will be put together. It's also used in re-evaluation, which occurs every 3 years in the special education process. So once a student has an IEP, every 3 years they're up for re-evaluation, which means that they just look at the eligibility, whether or not it should change, whether or not the student still qualifies for services or needs services to be successful. The intervention specialist and school psychologist will do the majority of the write-up for the evaluation team report. They'll both provide individual assessment data, whether it's CBM data, diagnostic data. We'll have both formative and summative data in the report's observational data. All of that stuff will be compiled to really get a holistic view of the child and the child's strengths and the child's areas of difficulty. These areas include things such as behavior, hearing, vision, social emotional needs, academic needs. All of these things need to be taken into consideration to determine what services to provide the child and how to write the IEP. Following the intervention specialist and school psychology reports, the team, which consists typically of an administrator, any other related service professionals, speech and language pathologists, OT, PT, any of those people who would be involved in the process, the parent, and often the student as well. This team will then compile a summary of all of the data that has been reported on this student, whether observational or formative summative data that's been collected, including a parent summary of their wishes for their child, their difficulties and strengths the student has at home as well. Using this, then, they will compile another section of this report that is really documentation that supports eligibility. So under IDEA, we have 13 categories that a student can qualify for services. And this documentation of a disability form really is talking about, based on the assessment data, we feel that the student qualifies for special education and under which category: specific learning disability, cognitive impairment, other health impairment. And so rather than trying to label the child, it's an opportunity for us just to look at all of the needs that they have based on this evaluation that's been done, and really to determine where the majority of their difficulty is coming from, but not negating the other areas that of need for them. So then the ETR report then is, if this child is found to be eligible, will be kind of the basis of developing the IEP. And many of you have already gone through a course that's talked briefly about the IEP, and for many of you, especially majors who are taking this class, you will do more with the IEP in your upcoming semesters. But this really is just a review of what the components are. So you have your present level of performance, your measurable goals, assessment status, which refers to both how the student is performing now, but also talks about modifications and accommodations for testing. So district-wide, statewide testing, what are some accommodations we will provide that child to make them, to kind of level the playing field. Then also some other compliance things. We need to include the number of minutes that a child will not be included in general education for pull-out or other related services. And then the frequency and amount of those services. So will this be weekly? Will this be 3 times a week? Will this be every other week? And making sure that that's all documented in the IEP. And then we need to bring in that progress monitoring piece, which we've been talking a lot about in this course, is how will we report the child's progress. IDEA says that progress needs to be reported at least as much as general education status is reported. So they usually base that on how many report cards or midterm reports are going out for all students. And then along with those, we also need to be providing progress towards IEP goals within that material. and then obviously at any other point throughout the year when a parent or someone else would like that information. Now, only for some students will we address this second column here, transition goals and services. Those really do not need to be addressed until 14 years of age. Sometimes they're addressed earlier if a child is on more of a functional-based IEP. Behavior plan, so students who specifically need support with social and emotional issues will then look at a separate behavior plan. ESL needs, Braille, communication, assistive technology, any of those other pieces that are more specific to individual students and don't need to be on there for all students that qualify. Then you'll see this last box that says short-term objectives. IDEA 2004 said that short-term objectives were no longer required for all students. They used to always be part of a measurable goal, but now they're only required for students who take alternate assessments. So typically those students who have moderate to intensive needs. However, those short-term objectives are really best practice, and if you are truly progress monitoring on a frequent basis, having those short-term objectives is really helpful, and you'll see that in the IEP example we're going to pull up soon. So for your final project in this course, what you are going to be asked to do is look through Dawson's ETR. You're going to look at what are some of the areas of need that he has, what are some of the areas of strength that he has, looking at all of the different data that's in here. So I highly recommend you read through this a couple times, look at some of the information. I do want to highlight a couple areas. First of all, the school psychologist report talks a little bit about where they're at grade level and some of their high stakes assessment scores, which really you won't be able to take too much from other than writing current levels of performance. However, they do also provide STAR data. This is based on data from a district-wide assessment that was used for progress monitoring. Now, STAR data can be used for both diagnostic and progress monitoring. They have two different forms of the assessment, but this particular information came from the progress monitoring tool. And you will see the norms for that also on our course site so that you can compare Dawson's scaled scores in the different areas to grade level peers. Another area to note too is right here is a curriculum-based measurement for writing that was administered. And the norms for that are also on our NECA site. But if you look at that, they show how many total words were written, and you can see the progress over time, how many words were spelled correctly, and then correct writing sequences refers more to grammatical spacing, periods, capitals, and so you can see those too. And I highly recommend you look at the norms that are posted on the course site so that you can compare those. But then really reading the descriptive data and looking at some of those other pieces. You will notice there's a lot of, particularly on the report from the school psychologist, you'll see a lot of achievement tests and even IQ data on there. These are tests normally only administered by a school psychologist and not something an intervention specialist would typically perform on their own. You need to be trained to give these tests. They're long. They need to be done individually. But this data, you can still pull whether or not, pull from it where they're at on their percentile rank for their grade level. And so that information is very useful when writing your present levels of performance. A unique thing with this particular report is that this student, you will notice, is someone who's been in special education for some time. However, he was initially qualified as having another health impairment. He was diagnosed with ADHD and qualified under that category. And the unique thing about this ETR is that at the end of the report, you'll see that they make him eligible under specific learning disability. And so as you read through, you'll get a really good handle on the purpose of these reports and why we do them, and for cases just like this where his eligibility and services changed. In addition to reading through the ETR report, you're also then going to complete an IEP. And so I put a blank template of the Ohio IEP on here. Sorry about that. I want to show you the sample actually. What you can do is look through this sample. I can get it to upload for you guys. And when you're looking through this, I want you to keep in mind the information I want you to fill out. I do not need all of the information about parents and guardians and all those things, and actually I've blacked out most of that on your ETR report. What I do want to see is that you're able to fill in kind of the special instructional factors. So looking at are these areas that we need to focus on for the IEP. The child's overall profile, and this will really be the largest section that you fill in. And this is really the holistic view of the child. What do they enjoy doing? What are their strengths? What are areas of difficulty? Providing some assessment data in specific content areas. So really giving us an overall view, almost a summary of that ETR report in this section. The transition section you will not be able to fill out because it really requires talking specifically to the student. And the student is only 14, so there's actually only one small little section that would have had to be filled out anyways. Then another big area that you're going to work on is the measurable annual goals. Now I know you have not had a lot of background in writing goals, so I'm not looking so much at the quality of the measurement you're using, so the rate that you have or the percentage. But what I do want to see is that the goal is related to that initial evaluation report. So that here you'll provide a very specific present level of performance based on the content area. So in this case, reading. And then you're going to write a measurable goal that's related to that. And then over in this box, you're going to click the methods you're going to use to monitor that progress. So are you going to use curriculum-based measurement? Are you going to use checklists, running records? What type of assessment will you use then to measure that goal? And just assume that you're an 8th grade teacher. Dawson, who our ETR report is on, is an 8th grader. And so just kind of keep that in mind that, you know, it may be more difficult to do running records on an 8th grader, or to keep a portfolio of work, whereas it might be easier to do some other options. But really, it's whatever you justify in your writing. You will also not have to write short-term objectives. This particular student does not have moderate to intensive needs, so it's not required. And as much as I think it's good practice to write in here, it would be difficult, I think, for you not having specific access to the measurement tools that you're choosing to use. So what I want you to do then is write as many goals as you think are necessary. So you may find that there's a behavioral goal or a writing goal or a reading goal. So looking at that ETR, what goals do I have to write? And so you'll be writing, that will be another bulk of the section that you'll be writing. And then the final thing that you will actually be filling out, because you can't fill out all of the areas that are on this IEP, however, I do recommend you read through this sample, is thinking of services. Now, you're not going to be able to be specific and say, you know, the resource room for 3rd grade or the 8th grade alternative education program. But what I do want you to do is think about the intervention specialist and how often this intervention specialist will need to work. So the frequency they'll have to work, and maybe even be more specific than weekly and say 3 times a week for 30 minutes. Or given that this child's in middle school, will you see him for a whole class period? Will you be in the general education setting, supporting him in different areas? And so putting that piece in here. And again, I'm not as worried about things like your total amount of time per year. I'm really just looking at your frequency and where that service is going to be provided and who's going to provide it. Are there other related services that are necessary? Is there such technology necessary? And then looking at what accommodations are necessary. What kind of modifications do I need to make to provide a strong, sound educational program for this student? So really, those are the areas you will be filling out for me. So number 7, and then as many goals as you feel are necessary. And then really looking at the profile, the student profile and the checklist here, the special instructional factors. And if you do those sections to the best of your ability, I'm sure you will do great. I really am taking into consideration that many of you have not had a lot of practice with IEPs. And for those of you who are minoring in this may never actually have to write an IEP or an ETR, but will be involved in those meetings. So it is important to understand the process that goes into developing them and creating these educational plans.